Welcome back to Sweet Sycamore Devotions. I'm Nicole. I love doing devotions with you, and we are in part 2 of Judas and Thomas. And you may be like, what do these two have in common? We already discussed some similarities, and we're going to get into more today. But Thomas and Judas are getting ready to follow Jesus into Jerusalem, and Thomas is like, if I die, I die. I'm going with him. Judas, on the other hand, has other plans going into Jerusalem, and we are going to pick right up in the scriptures in Luke 22, verses 1 through 6, and hear what Judas's plans were. All right. The festival of unleavened bread, which is also called the Passover, was approaching. The leading priests and teachers of religious law were plotting how to kill Jesus, but they were afraid of the people's reaction. Then Satan entered Judas Iscariot, who was one of the 12 disciples, and he went to the leading priests and captains of the temple guard to discuss the best way to betray Jesus to them. They were delighted, and they promised to give him money. So he agreed and began looking for an opportunity to betray Jesus so they could arrest him, and then without the crowds being around. Immediately, my thought is like, Satan enters Judas. That sounds so extreme. And by the way, how do I make sure that doesn't happen to me? Like uninvited or invited, like no thank you, all across the board. Well, we need to understand that Judas was already struggling with doubt. We see this with his reaction when Mary was anointing the feet of Jesus just previous to the story. And where we need to understand is that when we don't confess doubt, when we don't speak it out loud and say, hey, here's where I'm struggling or here's where I'm questioning, your enemy can build a home in that unconfessed doubt. In fact, doubt that we don't actually speak out loud and deal with can be an open door because somebody is going to speak into it. It's not the question of, oh, if I just hold it in, nobody will speak into it. Oh, no. It won't be God or your Christian friends because you're holding it inside, but it could be Satan. Or how about just even yourself, right? Self-answered doubt, when you're already confused, it means you don't have the answers, can lead to self-deception too. So if you're struggling with doubt, which is stemmed from confusion or not understanding, how about we go to the source that's not confused, that knows all the answers? And we see that Judas does not do this. Let me ask you this question. Who influences the way you navigate seasons of doubt? If you have a question, or maybe you're just struggling with something, what source do you go to that is more knowledgeable on that matter than you? When we have doubt with God, why is it that we immediately start feeling guilt or shame? Even like thinking, I shouldn't even be dealing with this right now. Well, because shame has always been, go back to the Garden of Eden, it has been a tactic of the enemy. And so we need to be able to identify that real quick and say, well, if I'm battling shame, that's not from God. In fact, if you feel shame, God is not a God of shame, and be able to identify, well, that is not coming from a good source. But let's catch back up with Judas and where he's at. So after he agrees to pay the money to turn in Jesus, Matthew's account, which we're not going to read exactly today, is in Matthew 26. Judas actually asks before he agrees, how much money am I going to get? And they tell him, well, you're going to get 30 pieces of silver. Proving again that Judas had this love of money. It was actually a first love. Back to even when he got upset at Mary wasting the bottle of perfume on Jesus. Interesting enough, also 30 pieces of silver. It wasn't like winning the lottery. In fact, 30 pieces of silver, it's in Exodus 21:32, tells us it's a price of a slave. That's not life-changing money to Judas, but it was for you and I, wasn't it? See, Jesus was traded for the price of a slave. Judas was willing to trade Jesus for an average amount of money. Why? Well, it's the same reason the scriptures speak about not having any idols in our life, because anything that comes before our relationship with God could lead to our demise. And that's what we see here with Judas. But here's a crazy thing. Nothing catches God off guard. In fact, listen to these words. It's in Matthew 26:20 through 25. It says this. When it was evening, Jesus sat down at the table with the 12, and while they were eating, he said, I tell you the truth, one of you will betray me. Greatly distressed, each one asked in turn, am I the one, Lord? And he replied, one of you who has just eaten from this bowl with me will betray me. For the Son of Man must die, as the scriptures declared long ago. But how terrible it will be for the one who betrays him. It would be better for that man if he had never been born. And Judas, the one who would betray him, asked, Rabbi, am I the one? And Jesus told him, you have said it. See, Judas had already made an agreement with the chief priest to turn in Jesus, yet he pretends like, am I the one? It had already happened. How many of us feel like we're pretending? Did you know that God knows when you're pretending? Like he knows you cannot pretend with God. Maybe internally you're saying like, oh, I've got major doubt and I've got major questions and I'm just going to keep pretending like everything is great. But we're not children anymore. We can fool those close with us for maybe a minute or two, but we cannot fool God. And often we play pretend because we're really just not happy with where we're at. So we pretend it's different. You know what I have found in my 37 years of walking really closely with the Lord is that my walk is not perfect. Let me tell you a little bit about my walk with Jesus. He is constantly refining me and I'm constantly pushing back. He is constantly calling me to step up and I am constantly afraid. We move 2 steps forward and 1 step back on a continual basis. And I am so angry at myself at times when I know what I need to do and I still don't do it. So if I know that this is my own walk with the Lord and I know it's not perfect, why would I think that somebody else's walk is perfect? Well, I don't. I know that that's just pretending. And pretending is a way that we can just keep everybody at bay, like not here, not going here. So I'm just going to pretend that everything is great. Not only people, but it's how we keep God at bay. And we feel the need to pretend because we're just not happy with reality. And we don't want people to see our reality. But God can't heal what we are pretending isn't there. We need to be real. If we made a commitment to be real and raw, wouldn't that be freeing? I actually believe that Judas could have had a completely different outcome. Now, hear me out here. I know it's not in the scriptures, but what if Judas would have said in this moment, you know what, you're right. It is me, and I actually already turned you in. And I am so sorry. Can you heal me? Can you forgive me? Can you mend this? And perhaps Jesus would even say, hey, you actually did what is required. It's a part of God's plan. And you know what? I am going to restore you in front of all these disciples. I am still going to give you a future and a hope, even though you majorly messed up. Perhaps Judas could have had a completely different outcome if he stopped pretending in this moment when Jesus directly called him out. But instead, he left that dinner that night. And just a short couple of hours later, he shows up in the garden and he kisses Jesus on the cheek, a kiss that would normally be like of honor. And instead, it's a full act of betrayal. It's a sign to identify Jesus as the one they are trying to grab in the dark of the night. First, because he loved money more than he loved Jesus. See, Judas found out quickly that sin always costs you way more than you wanted to pay and takes you way further than you ever wanted to go. Because after Jesus was condemned to death, Judas threw the money back at the feet of those chief priests and was like, take it all back. And they wouldn't. He wanted to take it all back. And he even announced that he was the one that betrayed Jesus, that he was in the wrong. But it was what it was. And then he went and he hung himself. At that point, the idols didn't matter. He never was able to use the money that he gained from it because of this unconfessed doubt and the love of other things before Jesus in his life. So how do we protect ourselves from not becoming a Judas? Well, let's go back to Thomas. Now remember, after Jesus has died and he rose from the dead, a few had seen him and he appeared to many people, but his disciples he appeared to while they were in a locked room. And Thomas was out getting them food. He probably drew the short end of the stick because no one is leaving, but Thomas has to go. And he comes back probably with his fast food bags of McDonald's. And listen to what happens. It's in John 20, verses 24 through 29. And it says this: one of the 12 disciples, Thomas, nicknamed the twin, was not with the others when Jesus came, and they told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he replied, "I won't believe it unless I see the nail wounds in his hands and put my fingers into them and place my hand in the wound in his side." 8 days later, the disciples were together again, and this time Thomas was with them. The doors were locked, but suddenly, as before, Jesus was standing among them. "Peace be with you," he said. Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and look at my hands. Put your hand on the wound on my side. Don't be faithless any longer. Believe." "My Lord and my God," Thomas exclaimed. Then Jesus told him, "You believe because you have seen. Blessed are those who believe without seeing." Can you imagine Thomas's reaction? Are you for real? Like, I had to go out and grab the food and I missed this. And he didn't have any reason to think that his friends would actually lie to him. I mean, these were people that they were in it to win it together, right? They were all together. But then it says 8 days. 8 days. Thomas stayed for 8 days. 8 days of his friends continually chatting about all the exciting news of seeing the risen Messiah, something that he wasn't a part of. 8 days of being loyal to staying there with them, even though it had to be incredibly hard to continually hear them talking about this. 8 days of sitting in doubt. Yet he stayed. And then he spoke his doubt out loud. He talked about it. He doubted in the community of believers. And because he stayed, guess what? Jesus showed up just for Thomas. He didn't condemn Thomas. He wasn't like, I can't believe you. No, he just encouraged him to have more faith. See, doubt is not actually the sin, but it's what can lead us to sinning or lead us to a deeper faith. The decision's up to us, what we do with it. How do you handle seasons when God seems to be moving for everybody else but you? Because really the difference between Judas and Thomas wasn't doubt itself, it's what they did with their doubt. Thomas looked for truth. Judas manipulated the truth to fit his narrative. Thomas continued to love Jesus in the middle of his doubt, but Judas misplaced his love in money and control. Thomas managed his doubt in the community of believers, and Judas, he managed it completely independently. Thomas's doubt drove him to look for Jesus, and Judas's doubt, it drove him to take control himself. And Thomas, he got to see the living Jesus. Judas's life was devastated by his own hands. One man's story ended in the declaration, "My Lord, my God," and the other in destruction. Oftentimes, we're so worried about the rebuke that we hide our doubt. But when Thomas spoke his doubt out loud, Jesus actually invited him in closer. He said, "Come and touch and feel." Thomas's doubt didn't disqualify him. It positioned him. I don't think loyalty is the absence of doubt. I think it's the decision to stay near even in the midst of it. And he will show up. Here are some questions I always give you to really ponder it and take it a step closer. First, who influences your season of doubt? I pray that after hearing this, maybe your thought is, I'm going to talk my doubt out with God and a community of believers because I actually believe that that will lead me to a deeper faith. The second question, like I asked before, how do you handle seasons when God seems to be moving for everybody else but you? I hope we can stay loyal like Thomas, because we will have unmet expectations. We will have confusion in this walk with the Lord. We will have doubt. Absolutely. But how we walk that out is everything. You're always going to follow and be loyal to what you love most. Always. Thank you so much for joining me in another devotion, and I am wishing you a very happy New Year.